Hello and welcome to the first Work Well webinar of 2021. So if this is your first time joining us, I'll give you a little bit of background before introducing our guest today. So the Work Well webinars, they grew out of the Workplace Wellbeing Ireland, the community and the events series that we had. Workplace Wellbeing Ireland is the community, it's a forum, it's there to kind of support people to share and to learn. And it's made up of those that are looking to promote and improve well-being within their workplace. So, as well as the community, we now have, you could call it like a portfolio of resources. We have, these webinars, we have the Work Well podcast, and we also have the Work Well Institute, which is where we host all our online learning and education. So the vast majority of the resources are free. The webinars, the podcast, the online forum, they're all free to use. And as you've signed up for the webinar today, you'll automatically be added to the mailing list so you can stay informed of any upcoming events and all the resources then as well. So for today, regardless of what's going on in the world, I think the beginning of the year is an excellent time to reflect and to plan and to start taking action. And with that in mind, there really is nobody better to welcome as our guest today to speak about taking action in 2021 than Brian Pennie. And Brian he's a lecturer, he's an author, he's my accountability partner, and he's a whole lot more as well. But I won't say any more at this stage because nobody tells Brian's story better than Brian himself. Our format for today, Brian, I think you're going to speak for about 20, maybe 25 minutes or so. We'll open up the floor to questions. So if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A function below. They'll come directly to myself and Brian. And if you like what you hear from Brian today and you'd like to dive deeper, then hang on to the end and Brian and I will explain how you can do so. More than enough from me for now. Brian Pennie, hello and welcome to the Work Well webinar.
Cheers, thanks. Really appreciate that introduction and thanks for joining, guys. I'm really excited to share this. I'm just going to pin my really excited for sharing this talk. There's a couple of things. If there's anything, I'm gonna chat a little bit about my own story. But if there's anything really that I would say that defines or is the biggest part of my recovery, I'm going to be talking about recovery from addiction. It is this aspect of taking action, taking responsibility and taking action from yourself. So I want to talk a little bit about my story in terms of taking action. I'm going to just show you a quick snippet of what my earlier story looked like, and then when I began taking action and what that did for my life. And then I want to talk about a few things that I've learned in the academic background and in my corporate background as well, some of the talks that I delivered to different companies. And then at the end, I want to give a few little tips, the big tools that I think the simplest, most practical and tangible tips on taking action. And that's really what this talk is going to be about today. So any questions, as Brian mentioned, throw them in the Q&A. I'm open to any questions. Nothing is off the table for me. So any questions, put them in. I think the gold really happens in the Q&A. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. So I want to start. I'm just going to share a couple of slides before I get back into the normal view here. Oh, not too far there. So I really want to start just and give you a little bit of an introduction to my own story as well. So some of you might know, I know Brian has mentioned that I think in the bio for the sign-up sheet. But my story for many years, you wouldn't expect me to be speaking here at a corporate event because I spent much of my life as a chronic heroin addict. The picture on the left there is an image of me 2 years before I hit rock bottom from 15 years of chronic heroin addiction. The picture on the right there is a picture of me last year. So there's actually nearly 10 years between them pictures, but I look older in the left-hand side by a long way. It's not a good look. But I just want to give you a little bit of an insight into my addiction, because a lot of people might struggle to relate to someone in addiction, especially heroin addiction. But what I always try to tell people is that I didn't have an addiction problem. I had an anxiety problem and a compulsive thinking problem. I was consumed by anxiety and tortured by my mind. Now, this came from childhood trauma. and other elements of my life. But I really just fed that, like the anxiety, fear of anxiety fed the anxiety. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that right now. And that sort of activates your mind, overthinking, negative self-talk, all of these different things. And it just spiraled me into a world of addiction. I remember trying the first time doing drugs, and it just took me away from myself and helped me to cope with my mind and to cope with that anxiety. Now, it was obviously a bad decision in hindsight, but that's when I was young. I was only in my young teens, and I didn't really know much better. But going forward, to help you guys relate to that as well, even in that picture on the left-hand side, I was still working. I was working in a graphics company in Glasnevin. And the reason why I got away with working, like I was a functional addict for a lot of that time, is because people thought I was an alcoholic, and it was kind of accepted to be an alcoholic, to have a really serious drink problem. So it's crazy to think of that. So just so you guys can relate a little bit more, I didn't have an addiction problem. I had an anxiety problem that I medicated with drugs, and that's really where it was at. And I also stayed functional for much of that time. But in 2013, I stopped functioning. I pretty much, everything went out the window. It was 15 years. The addiction got really deep. I'd stopped functioning a few years before that, you could say. And the addiction got very deep. And I lost my job. I lost my mind. I lost my health, as you can see there. I had another 2 years of addiction after that picture. So I got a lot worse than that, if you can imagine that. And I lost every important relationship in my life. And it was basically time for me to sink or swim, to live or die. And I said, right, I'm going to have to try to get into an addiction center and to try to get off drugs. So my story, really the pivotal moment of my story, I tried to get into a detox facility, and I couldn't get in for safety reasons and health reasons. I was on too many benzodiazepine. So I decided to do a detox at home. And 2 days into that home detox was not only the most painful night of my life, it was also the most important. Now, I woke up on my sitting room floor, and there was 2 days into that detox, and there was blood everywhere. And what had happened is I had a grand mal convulsive seizure. And what happens with a grand mal convulsive seizure is that all the neurons in your brain fire at the same time. It's like this cascading effect where all the neurons just fire. And I was basically, all my muscles were convulsing, and I actually drove my teeth through my tongue. And that's where the blood was coming from, lying on my sitting room floor. Now, I was rushed to the hospital. My family rallied around me. I was rushed to the hospital, and I don't remember much of what happened, but I do remember waking up in the hospital several hours later. I woke up on a trolley and lying in the hospital, and I was emotionally, mentally, and physically broken in every way possible. I was just absolutely broken. And I remember that trying to get up off the trolley, and I was trying to pull myself up off the trolley. And I remember just my eyes just fixated on this red fire extinguisher on the wall. Now, I knew it was a red fire. I knew it was red, the color red, and I knew it was a fire extinguisher. But I actually couldn't make sense of this thing on the wall. I was saying, that's red, and that's a fire extinguisher. And I couldn't put the sentence together. And I remember looking around the rest of the room saying, oh my God, I can't put any concepts together. I can't put the world together. My verbal repertoire was gone. And I remember just thinking to myself, oh my God, that's brain damage. Game over, brain damage, you're done. And I remember just waiting for this dread, panic, anxiety. I struggled with panic attacks my entire life as well. And I was waiting to have this panic attack. And I remember just lying down on the trolley and just saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I give up. I just can't do this anymore. I can't fight this anymore. I give up. You win. I'm done. And I remember this, the first time in my life, it was like this sense of calm washed over me. And what I'd come to realize was that was the first time in my life that I stopped fighting reality. I stopped fighting anxiety, and I surrendered to the reality of the situation. Now, I believe that was the moment that gave me the opening. It was like a chink in the armor, a chink in the ego to allow me to transform my life. Now, I had another couple of weeks in detoxing at home, with another couple of hospital visits. I went to the detox facility. I had to come off opiates in there. It was another really, really difficult experience. But through the pain of that night and what I began learning in detox, and when I start reading and when I start taking action in detox, my life just completely transformed. And there was a really important part of that. Like, my first day clean was the 8th of October 2013. And I remember, I'll never forget it. I was on a farm. The detox facility was a farm. And I remember walking out that morning, and there was just an energy in the air. There was something changing in me in the days previous to that. I would start reading books. I start getting involved in mindfulness, Eastern philosophy. And I remember it's just this whisper in my mind, oh my God, you might have a life again. And that was at a time where I start taking action in my life. I start taking accountability for my life. I start meditating. I start reading. Over the following few months, I start making decisions to go to college and to start doing things and to start changing my life. And it was the most important part of this, that this all happened. All of the changes in my life happened through action. Now, another element of that, I'm going to talk about consistency in a second, but the big piece that I really want to talk about here, and the name of my book is actually called Bonus Time. And the reason why I call it that is because I was given a second chance at life. But what this has allowed me to do is to take action. And the benefits of this have been immense on an emotional, on a mental, on a tangible level, on a spiritual level, by taking action. And some of these actions include, I developed a morning routine, I start meditating, but I also stop being afraid of things. I embraced failure. I leaned towards fear. I took risks. I took chances. And I start being bold and believing in my dreams. And that was really a key part of that, beginning to take action. But a really important element of that is, and I try to tell this to people all the time, that it's all about consistency. Consistency is the key. And it started with me with baby steps. I start meditating a little bit. I start reading books. I talked about going to college, and I looked into going to college. Then I went to college and I done a degree in psychology. I got my degree in psychology, but it was all about that consistent action and baby steps. When I got my degree in psychology, I was very lucky to win a scholarship for Trinity College, where I'm in my final year doing a PhD. And all of this was really about taking action and showing up every day. There was no big, huge movement in any way. I didn't do something huge to take these steps. There was reaching out to people, networking with people, showing up every day, exercising, having a morning routine, and all of these different things, which we'll be chatting a little bit later on. But action will define you. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And action is where it's at. And the funny thing is, when people go to talks or New Year's resolutions or read a great book, they have plans to act. And if you act, you'll shine, because most people don't act. But if you act consistently, you'll be unstoppable. And that's where it really is. So before I get into what I really want to talk about today, I just want to show you tangible evidence of the power of consistent action. I was very lucky. I wasn't lucky to be in a detox facility, but I was lucky to be part of a brain study when I was in detox. And that picture on the left-hand side is an image of my brain in 2013 while I was in detox, 2 days before I actually got me first clean day. The picture on the right-hand side is an image of my brain in 2018. Luckily for me, I'm actually in the Institute of Neuroscience in Trinity College, so I have access to an MRI machine. And what we found through these scans, that there are huge changes in the area of my brain that are related to anxiety, fear, the link between the stress response, and all of these different areas have showed huge changes. Now, there's another important element of this as well, and it's around, I actually reduce the age of my brain. So we do these things in Trinity, in the Institute of Neuroscience, where we predict brain age. And in that image in 2018, I had a chronological age of a 39-year-old man, but I had the brain predicted age of someone 10 years younger. And that came through consistent changes, through consistent action over those 7 years. I literally reduced the age of my brain. And what this predicts in life is a better physical health, reduced chances of dementia and cognitive decline, and many other elements in the real world when you reduce the age of your brain. And what it is, you're measuring the density of the grey matter in the brain, and that's what we actually do. And this comes through consistent action, because any actions you do, I'm not going to go into the depths of neuroplasticity, but what it is you change the shape of your brain. And this doesn't come by just taking action, like going for a run, playing tennis, playing football. It happens with how you think. Whatever you rest your mind upon, be it anger, jealousy, or fear, your brain will take that shape. And through consistent action over the years, I have literally changed the shape of my brain and changed how I feel. I used to say that anxiety drove my whole addiction. I was terrified of anxiety, but I have a wonderful relationship with anxiety today. I embrace anxiety. I felt anxious a little bit before this talk. I say, there you are, tight chest, do what I do, and I implemented my practices and I feel okay. And it's all about this consistent action over time. So I think it's really important getting this point across. So it's about taking action, but it's baby steps, building it up, consistent action, building that momentum. So I'm just going to stop the share there. And I want to really talk about the big thing that I really want to talk about today is around this idea of acting to feel better. And I came across this story when I was doing my degree in psychology. I came across a story in a book. It wasn't a story. It was a theory of emotion, the James Lang theory of emotion, which states that we feel a certain way because of how we act. But there was a little image in the book that just blew me away and has stayed with me ever since. And this image in the book was this little bird singing in a tree. And this man, older man, was walking underneath the tree. And he looks up and he says to the bird, you're singing because you're happy. And the little bird looks down and he says, no, don't be silly. I'm happy because I'm singing. And this has just stuck with me so long now. And what this theory of emotion says, that we don't act because we feel a certain way. We feel a certain way because of how we act. Basically, our motion drives our emotions. So if we change ourselves physically, and that even means thinking a different way and acting, meditating, all these different things, you will change how you feel. And this is really, really important. I was chatting to a friend of mine yesterday, and I was talking to him about this idea. And he was saying, yeah, like when you smile in the mirror, if you just start smiling at yourself in the mirror, you start laughing, and you actually do feel a little bit better. So our actions actually determine how we feel. And it's a really, really important point, because if you don't feel like getting up in the morning and you stay in bed, you're acting towards your feelings. But if you say, no, I'm going to act into my feelings. I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to do something part of my morning routine. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go make a good breakfast. I'm going to get to work. I'm going to do what I do. Then you feel better. And I know many of us will have experienced this, because we all know if you get up and do the work, you feel better. So our actions determine how we feel. Now, I in a lot of the work that I do, I dive into the science of this. I'm going to touch into this at the end when I talk about a few how-tos around taking action. But all of this stuff is grounded in science, grounded in neuroscience. So when you take them actions, you are changing your physiology. That changes how you think, and your thinking is linked to your emotions, because language is a vehicle for emotions. So how you think and that self-talk is a vehicle for those emotions. So when you change how you act, you change how you think, and you change how you feel. And that's how all of this really works. Now, the second piece that I want to talk about is about taking values-based actions. And it's very much linked to what I was just talking about previously. So I often talk about this in terms of making values-based decisions instead of feelings-based decisions. And our decisions are our actions at the end of the day. So I'm going to give you a quick example of this. So if I feel like eating the donut, eating the cake, having a drink, having a glass of wine every day after work, and that's what I feel like doing, well, I'm not really going to be as healthy as I want to be. If I wake up in the morning and I don't feel like getting out of bed, and I hit the snooze button 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and I don't get out of bed and I get up late, I'm not going to feel good. And they are basically feelings-based decisions or feelings-based actions. But what we need to be making is values-based decisions and values-based actions. So it's really, really important to think of the things that you actually value. Now, we can have tangible things that we value, like our family, like our physical health, like our mental health, and these are very tangible things. So I value my mental health, so I get up and I implement my morning routine and I exercise during the day. Now, as usual, the mind negotiates, and that's like the older part of the brain negotiating with the newer part of the brain. Our older part of the brain wants comfort, wants safety, and it thinks the safety belongs in doing the easy thing all the time. So that's why these negotiations go on. It's like, have the cake. No, you shouldn't have the cake. Oh, you should have the cake. Oh, go and have the cake. You deserve it. No, but I want to be healthy. Stay in bed another few minutes. Oh, no, but I really should get up. These are the negotiations that happen in our mind. But what we need to recognize is that we need to make values-based decisions and take action on those values. Other values of mine include accountability, boldness. They're really personal values of mine, but it's loyalty, trust, open-mindedness, connection, compassion. These are things, and I've thought deeply about my values. And when it comes to making decisions, I say, are these aligned with my values? And if they are, I will take actions based on that. I talked about family. Connection is a huge value of mine. So will I connect with people that I love and that I care for? Yes, because it's a values-based decision, a values-based action. Will I get up in the morning when my alarm goes off? Yes, because I value my mental health. I value my physical health. I value accountability in industry. I value getting things done. So that's what I do. But if I act on my feelings and I let the reptilian, the older mind work and the safety kick in, then you're in trouble. And the reason why this is really important today more than ever is because we're in a time, and it's really difficult. I'm not saying any of these things are easy, but it's really difficult right now because we're under stress, we're under anxiety. The pandemic is going on, and we're feeling it's tough. Like, it's tough for everybody, and anxiety is contagious. And when you feel negative feelings like that, stress and anxiety, you want to avoid them things, and it's hard to make these decisions. But at the end of the day, if you act towards your values and you take those actions, they build up over time, and you build up that momentum, and you really do become unstoppable. I don't want to get in deep into the neuroscience of habits, but the way habits work in the brain is they want to take the path of least resistance. And if you get into bad habits, thinking habits as well, or feelings-based habits like procrastination and things like that, they are the path of least resistance. But if you start making values-based decisions on a consistent basis, that becomes your new norm, and they become the new path of least resistance. So you literally change the shape of your brain to think better, to act better, and it just becomes what you do over time. And this is why it's so important that consistent action is really, really critical. So before we jump into the Q&A, I really want to give a couple of tips around how to take action, because I'm describing areas of taking action, and I've given you a tip around making values-based action. So have a think about your values. If you're struggling to think about your own values, you could ask yourself, there's of course a couple of great questions around that. Like, what would you want your friends to say about you at your own funeral? What another great question, like, look for people you admire and say, what do you value in them? The value of mine is composure. I wouldn't be the most composed person in the world. I'm more about enthusiasm and passion, but I value composure in other people. So that's a value of mine that I try to work towards. But you could also look at people and flip it around, like people that you don't value, like Donald Trump. What has he got? And flipped on its head, invert that and say, right, that's what I don't want. I don't want to be arrogant. So I'm going to have humility, and that's what you value. So there's different ways of looking at this. If you don't like being overwhelmed, then you value inner peace. And you can just flip these things and reverse these things to find what the values are in your life. But so a couple of actions that I want to really give away. So a really important part of taking action, and it's one of the simplest things you can do, is changing your environment. Most people think that motivation lives in their heads. If you're motivated, you're motivated. You're an internally motivated person. If you're not motivated, you're not motivated. But that's not how it works. Motivation works through the environment and how you schedule your routines. So if you were saying you're not motivated to go for a run, but then I put a vicious dog behind you, you will run. You'll be motivated because I changed the environment. If you don't feel like getting up out of bed, then I turn around and say, oh, the kids are downstairs. It's Christmas Day. It's Sandy came. All of a sudden, you're energized. You want to run down the stairs. So when you change the environment of what's going on, you change your levels of motivation. And that's really important to recognize, that change your environment changes how you think and how you act. So if you wanted to have a better routine in the morning, if you want to start journaling, leave your journaling book down by where you're going to get dressed. Leave your running shoes down by where you're going to get dressed. I used to start doing crazy things. I'd be leaving things in the fridge, and I'd go to the fridge and say, oh, that's what I have to do. So use your environment to change how you act. Make use of your phone. Make use of your laptop. Leave Post-its around. Leave Post-its everywhere. So change your environment. If you want to eat healthier, remove junk food. Because I remember hearing the saying, if you go into a barber shop and sit there for 10 years, you will end up getting a haircut, which is ironic thinking about haircuts right now. But if you don't change your environment, that's what will happen. Your environment is a huge determinant of many of our actions. So changing your environment is absolutely crucial. It really, really is. And around working at home as well, like if you're feeling unmotivated and if you're sitting on the couch where you usually watch telly, that's the way psychology works, is that's your chill out area, that's your time. So the body is primed to think like that. So go to an area and set up a workspace, you change your environment and you will change the levels of motivation. And that's really, really important. Another one is around morning routines. I've mentioned morning routines a few times, and it's really an important part of setting yourself up for the day. I often say it's the first line in my book is, I'm the happiest person I know. And I truly believe that. And I think 90% of the game of that is having a morning routine. Now, I have a morning routine. It's a 10-minute routine. It's around meditation, affirmations, visualization, and gratitude, all heavily grounded in neuroscience. I only do things that are grounded in science. That's really, really important for me. But what I found is that when you win the morning, you win the day, because you're setting yourself up for the day. You're setting your intentions for the day. You are priming yourself into action, and you are setting the scene for the day. So that is a really, really important one. So you can change your environment to set yourself up for the morning routine. And even if you have kids and you're in lockdown, like a 2-minute morning routine, you can stack habits. I love this idea. It's James Clear's idea of stacking habits. Mindfully brush your teeth, stay in the bathroom for an extra minute, and have a little gratitude practice. It doesn't have to be huge, but these consistent actions over time grow legs and really add up. Another important idea that I came across is from a woman called Mel Robbins. Many of you might have heard of her, and it's the Mel Robbins 5-second rule. Now, I've dug deep into this 5-second rule, and it simply means when you feel yourself procrastinating or negotiating and you don't want to act, you give a 5-second countdown and act into go. So you say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, boom, and you go. You don't count up, you count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And this is one of the biggest game changers for me. Anytime I wanted to implement change in my life, I'd say, boom, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And I've done it every single time. And I built the momentum and the consistency with that as well. So it was even like I find myself negotiating and say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And you just jump into it. Don't think, go. Because it's within those 5 seconds when we start negotiating, we start rationalizing, we start justifying, and we will come up with a reason to not do what we have to do. And again, it's that reptilian brain trying to convince you that you should stay in comfort zone. And once you go past those 5 seconds, what I find is the reptilian brain wins and the cortex loses out. And all of a sudden you're doing what feels comfortable. Now, I dug deep into this from Mel Robbins' work as well. And it turns out that this stuff is really grounded in science. One of these things that is one of the ideas behind this is the locus of control. It's a really important concept in psychology. So if you're using the 5-second rule, you are acting what's inside of your control. And much of what we're anxious right now about is outside of our control. We're worried about COVID, what's on social media, other people's behavior, other people's attitudes. And this is what we're worried about in lockdown. They are outside of our control. What's inside of our control is our response to the situation, how we change our environment, if we implement the morning routine, our reaction to difficult situations, implementing the 5-second rule and acting towards what we actually value. And this is really, really important. And the thing that I found in the science of the 5-second rule as well was that locus of control means that we are in control. If you have an external locus of control, you are like a puppet being pulled around by the world. But if you have an internal locus of control, you are the one in control of your actions, your attitudes, your behavior, and it's a much stronger place to be in. Another element in the science related to the 5-second rule is this idea called activation energy that's grounded in biology and chemistry. And what it finds is, and it's like a neuron in the brain. The way neurons work in the brain, when a neuron fires, it's an all or nothing response. And once that neuron fires, it's like actually a flush in a toilet. And it's like it flushes and it can't activate again for a while. But once that flush is pressed, the flush goes on. And that's the way our brains work. And that's the way our actions work. So once we make that decision, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, it takes a lot of energy to go. But once you go, momentum takes care of the rest. So if you ever find, oh my God, I have to write this paper, I have to do this, I have to read this article, once you go and do it, it's not that big a deal. I have to go for a run, the thoughts of it. The negotiation hurts more than the run. The negotiation hurts more than the morning routine. The negotiation hurts more than prepping for that presentation or whatever that is. It's the negotiation that hurts, the procrastination that hurts, not the actual action. And once you act into that, it's an absolute game changer. Now, before we get into the Q&A, guys, I just want to leave you a couple of pieces. And the really important one here is around baby steps. Because if you set yourself up to climb a mountain from nothing, you're going to kill your motivation. So another key part of motivation as well is make it easy. Make it easy for yourself. So when you wake up in the morning, if it's a morning routine, 2-minute morning routine. If it's about going for a run, go for the 5-minute run. If you have to prep for the presentation, say I'm going to do 10 minutes of that. If you have to write an article, say I'm going to write 100 words. And it's like that activation energy that will take care of the rest. But it's about taking action, keep it simple, take baby steps, build that consistency. And all of a sudden, over time, you'll be taking more consistent action. And if you keep on doing that, it just becomes the norm. And over time, you will change your brain, you will change how you act, and it is literally the new norm. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'm really looking forward to the Q&A now. And yeah, thanks for joining me.
Well, Brian, listen, that was amazing. First thing I have to say is I'm glad we're recording this, because I definitely have to go back and look over that again, because there was so much there. I'm taking notes, trying to take notes anyway, but I definitely have to go through that again. I mean, the baby steps, so important, as you say, to get started, then take action. But a really important point you mentioned as well was it's not just take action and hope for the best. Then it's a consistent action.
Yeah.
So take that consistently over time. I find that, like, I don't lift heavy weights, I've absolutely no plans to ever run a marathon, but I'm just consistent with my, my light exercise almost every single day, my nice light workout. And that works really well for me, just that consistency. I think that's so important in every facet of life, as you're talking about there. Emotion dictates our emotion. Love that story about the bird. That's powerful stuff, isn't it? Like,
that when I read that, it stuck with me ever since I seen that. I was like, oh my God, it's so true. And it stuck with me ever since.
Yeah, and if we can practice that, like,
yeah,
actually, the equivalent of singing, if you like, and then that dictates how we feel, or our emotion. Then I love that idea. And I think we've all been there when I heard you talk about the mind negotiates. About if it's exercise or if it's getting out of bed, that negotiation. So you can you're talking about like nipping that negotiation in the bud, the 5-second rule, just get out. And that negotiation piece, as you said, if maybe it's writing a long essay or something, it's the getting started part is always the hardest part, isn't it?
It's crazy. And once you get going, you're like, it wasn't that big a deal.
Too small Latin Hibra is a great Irish saying that just reminds me of that. Like, getting the hardest part is getting started. And when you get a good start, that's half the work done almost. Love that idea. Well, listen, I could keep talking all day about this, but we've got some fantastic questions in. I'm seeing some comments coming in as well. The one question we got in yesterday, the first question actually we got in yesterday, and it actually really kind of resonated with me, because I felt I actually could have written this one myself. So if it's okay, I'll start running a few questions by you, Brian.
Yeah, sure. Please.
And that first question is, so what are the tips to stop the constant internal chatter, and in all of it, not just the negative? So here's someone saying, my head is full of to-do lists, things I should do, could do, need to do's. I feel this one personally. It's never quiet, and I'm so easily distracted from the task at hand because of this noise. And then this then leads to negative thought patterns as I can't focus.
Yeah, that's a good question. I can relate to that myself. I really can. The one big thing, there's a 3-pronged attack to that, really, to be quite honest. One of the little things that I do, and I have these everywhere I go, it's basically a post-it. So if I'm working along, I find my mind gets distracted. And if you're busy and work and stuff like that, you might think of an idea, and it could be a good idea, and you don't want to forget about it, and it's a distraction. And sometimes what I used to do is I'd be working on something, then I think of something, and I go in and check that, then I go in and check something else. And I could be like 10 steps away from where I started. I'm so distracted. I'm just checking emails, that leads to something else. And I'm thinking of an idea and I don't want to forget it. And then I don't write it down. I'm thinking I don't want to forget that. And the mind just gets cluttered. So what I found is I just keep this, I call it a distraction list. So anything that comes into my mind, I just put it down there really, really quickly and write it down. And it's like a mini form of journaling. I remember Ariana Huffington once said that journal is like window wipers for the soul. And if you, that's another great thing to do as well. So if your mind is really, really cluttered, put it on a page, get a brain dump and put it on a page. And what you find is, I found this with emails over time, like you think you have loads of important emails, and if you're forced to leave them for a few days, when you go back, you'll find, well, some of them weren't even that important, like they didn't even need a response. And I think it's the same for much of the thinking that goes on in our heads as well. It's not really that important. So I think it's the worry, being distracted, of forgetting about these things. So if you just put brain dump, stick it on a page, and come back to it the next day or a couple of hours later, it's just a great way of just getting more objective about what you're thinking about. Now, another element of that as well, the other element I will say is around meditation and having a meditation practice, because research shows that literally, like, you have an area of the brain, it's called the anterior cingulate cortex, and it's to do with attention and it's to do with concentration. And people that meditate consistently over time have a much denser area of that brain structure than non-meditators. So meditation literally changes the shape of your brain in terms of concentration and attention levels. So that's a really important point as well. And you don't need to meditate for an hour a day or anything like that. Like I chatted earlier about habit stacking. So I do a lot of micro meditations and habit stacking. So every morning, for 3 minutes in the morning and 3 minutes in the evening, I mindfully brush my teeth. For when I have my first coffee of the day, I lift the coffee up and I drink it mindfully. I get into my car and put my hands on the steering wheel. I had lots of these little micro meditative moments, and it's really just bringing yourself into the present moment and stopping yourself getting distracted all the time, because distractions is thinking about the future, thinking about the past. So you need to bring yourself into that moment. But a really great technique that I think is really, really important, it's an acronym that people tend to remember. And when you feel like overthinking, distracted, and the emotions that go with that as well, like you're feeling overwhelmed, just say to yourself this acronym, RAIN. It's from Tara Brach, let it rain. And the acronym is like this. So it's like, the first one is R, recognize. So recognize that you're overwhelmed. Recognize that you're being distracted. Recognize that you're feeling a little bit stressed. That's the R. The A is allow. Allow it to be there. Allow those thoughts to be there. Don't analyze the hell out. Don't say you have to do them, and say, just allow them to be there in an observer kind of way. So I always use this metaphor. It's like the clouds floating through the sky. And sometimes they're dark and angry, sometimes they're happy and fluffy, but dark and distracted thoughts, whatever they may be. But you're the blue sky, and you can actually observe these thoughts instead of engaging with them. So be the observer. And that's really that part of it. So allow them to be there without engaging. The I of this is to investigate. And this isn't in a real analytical way. It's sort of like curious, playful investigation. Say, why am I so distracted? Why am I letting this bother me? That's interesting. And just let it sit there, but don't get too involved in it. Don't analyze. And the N is this piece of non-attachment. So don't be attached to them. Let them sit there. So what I do is, anytime I feel overwhelmed or anything like that, I just say to myself, let it rain. And I literally feel the rain flowing down my face. Say, right, recognize what's happening. Allow it to be there. Investigate, say, why am I feeling like this? What's driving this? Is there something going on during the day? Is there a big thing? But then be non-attached to that. So it's a really nice little memorable kind of acronym to remember when you're feeling overwhelmed, distressed. But I think the big one there is around meditation, and the RAIN metaphor is built on meditation as well. Tara Brach is a big meditator as well. So I think they would be the cues that I would go towards that. And I think the observation piece is really, really critical, because self-observation is the biggest tool. It builds self-awareness, and it's the biggest tool in my locker, because I often say I have a wonderful relationship with anxiety. It's because I'm not the anxiety anymore. I allow it to be there and I observe it. There you are. There's those feelings. There's those thoughts. I allow it to be there and I let them go. And I do this with all elements in my life. And it's a really, really powerful practice over time.
Excellent. And I love that the acronym there, makes a lot of sense. It's a very kind of mindful and meditative way of actually looking at it, of overwhelm. And so taking a step back from it, love that. Brilliant. Another question here. So someone has almost finished reading your book, Bonus Time, great read, fascinating read. And so you speak about the importance of self-awareness for everyone and its role in your recovery. Do you believe that too much self-awareness can negatively impact someone who's predisposed to anxiety or overthinking?
Yeah, this is I've gotten this question a few times in the past, and like everything in life, like we put a label on things and we call it that's self-awareness, that's anxiety, that's depression, that's this, that's that. But like we just put labels on these things. The label isn't the thing. So I think sometimes we get confused of what we think something is and the name of what something is. Like I often think, like, I see the color red as red in my eyes, but you might see it as green, but we both call it red. So like self-awareness is like that as well. Anxiety is like that as well. It's a lots of biological things going on with anxiety, but we have different interpretations of what it is. So for me, when I get this question off people, I think there's self-awareness is like on a spectrum. Like you have unawareness and just complete unconsciousness, and people are just tormented by their mind and they can't even see outside of themselves the way I used to be. And then there's levels of self-awareness. So I think if you have true self-awareness, it's self-awareness, like once you become aware, you can't help but change. And I don't think anxiety or any of these things can live in true self-awareness. Like where I think some people get confused is they're aware that they're anxious, but the anxiety is still pulling the strings. But if you fully become aware that there is nothing you can do about anxiety, all of a sudden then you'll stop the fight. Like anxiety drives anxiety. There's a lovely metaphor for that. It's like a tug of war with a monster, the anxiety monster, and there's a big pit in the middle. And you keep on pulling the rope, but the monster's too strong. He's pulling you closer and closer to the pit. You can be aware that anxiety is winning. But if you just drop how do you win that thing? You drop the rope. Because what you're saying is you can't fight anxiety. Anxiety is winning. You're still going to be anxious when you drop the rope. The anxiety monster is still there. But by dropping the rope, it gives you an opportunity to do something else. So I think true awareness is around recognizing these different elements, truly being aware that you are not in control of these. When you feel anxious, you have to just let it be there and let it sit there. And I think that's the really important piece of that as well. But true awareness, I don't think anything can live in true. You can't be overly aware. I think that you would be overly conscious. You would be overly worried rather than overly aware, and you're really digging into it. But awareness is really just that sense of present. It's present moment awareness. That's the key piece, to be aware of your body and be aware of different things like that. The one difference where I would say for that, if you struggle with bodily trauma over time, which I did myself, it's if you can become very hyper aware of that, and it can be problematic. But otherwise, I think awareness is fine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And maybe still on the subject of anxiety and a question in on that. Any message? There's somebody asking, any message would you for a 14-year-old individual, a child now who's maybe struggling around managing anxiety?
Yeah, it's a difficult one with the kids, and the big question there really is, are they willing to, like I have a lot of parents that ask me, how can I make my child do the tools to make them less anxious? And there's no winning there. Like the best thing you can do is like maybe plant the seed and let them find their own way. And I know that's really, really difficult, but in my experiences with trying to change people, you cannot change anyone. You really, really can't. Now, if the kid is willing to put some work into that, and they're aware that they need to do a few things, and it's very hard for kids as well. It's all the same tools that come down to that. Like it's around meditation, it's around self-observation, it's around the knowledge and understanding that they cannot be anxiety. They need to let it sit there. And it's like help them become more aware of their negative self-talk, like help them to understand like what is actually driving the anxiety. Because we all have this inner narrative that's going on all the time. We all have these stories that we tell ourselves. And as I mentioned before, like part of my PhD looks deeply into this. Language is a vehicle for emotion, and this includes the self-talk as well. So when you're really struggling with anxiety, there's negative self-talk that's really going down with that as well. And you could be like, it could be inner critic, you could be berating yourself, you could be really harsh to yourself, and the emotions that go through that as well. So you have to become aware of these things as well. So again, awareness is the key. Awareness is the holy grail, because I struggled with all of these things, but once I became aware, everything changed. And for that, I gave access. If anyone could check, it's helped a couple of kids. If that person wants to check out my website actually, and there's a self-talk course in there, have a little look at that and send me an email, because I'm starting giving it for kids, no problems. You can send me an email on that, and I'll send access to that course on.
Brilliant. We will do that. And if so, brianpennie.ie, is it, or
you get brianpennie.com. brianpennie.com.
Yeah. Or reply to your invitation to this webinar, and I can send you
send it on.
Brian. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
I'm happy to give that for
Yeah.
free for kids.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Here's a question kind of specific to an industry. Any advice to share with small groups in construction and mainly the younger population to stay positive? So I imagine it's probably like a male-dominated.
What I have found, because I've done a lot of talks in the construction industry, funnily enough, and what I've personally found is that like in the engineering practice and the construction, and I think that type of people would see gratitude, they would see visualization as more of fluffy concepts, and this stuff is not fluff. This stuff is grounded in science. So what I would always try to do with people like that, with groups like that, I would keep it really practical, really tangible. I would show them the science behind these things as well. And I think what they really need to do as well, especially if it's a male-orientated thing, they need to be vulnerable. They need to show their feelings. So I think it's really important for someone to step up and be brave and be vulnerable and say, look, it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel crap. Like there's a reason why suicide is so much higher in the male environment. It's because we're not sharing our feelings. It was the essence of mine. I wouldn't dare tell anyone I struggled with anxiety because I seen it as weak. And that's what the problem was. So I think it's around being vulnerable around that as well. But I think what's really important is to be practical, to be tangible and ground it in science, because I think those sort of groups are much more receptive to that kind of stuff.
Excellent. We'll try and get through a few more questions. I'm conscious of everyone's time here. A few questions around, any advice for how do we separate our work and our home life, given that a lot of us are actually working from home at the moment? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, I touched on this a while ago, I think, around change your environment. I never forget, I was talking to someone in AIB about that, and she just really said it to me. She says she remembered when she was driving across the bridge, it was like a switch from her home to work. It was like a switch was flicked, and it was like, now she's in home mode, now she's in work mode. So when we're in lockdown, we don't have a home mode and a work mode. It's all intermingled. And then some people have kids on top of that as well. So you have home mode, work mode, school mode, all molded into one. So I think the best thing you can do is try to create those separations as best you can. So as I mentioned earlier on, change your environment, because if you watch telly in bed, you struggle to go to sleep for the reason that your bed should be somewhere that you sleep. So our context really determines our actions and how we feel. It's a lot of this stuff is subconscious. So if you can, try best to set up some kind of office environment that you even subconsciously feel is your office space, it's your workspace. This is when you go to work, and set times up as well. Like I think having a daily routine is really, really important. Like I go to work at 9 o'clock. I do this at 9:30. I have my lunch at 10:20. I work in this space. So write it down, be really clear, have clarity. Like one of the things and the problems of COVID-19 is the uncertainty and the unpredictability. It's robbed us of clarity. So try to restore some of that clarity by having a routine and having a set space of where you work. And that will have a huge impact. It doesn't feel like it at the time, but that will have a huge impact psychologically. And setting your context up and having a routine is incredibly powerful.
Excellent. And speaking of routine, there's a question in, someone's asking about your own, you touched on this now already, what does your own morning routine look like, and how often would you, or how much time would you spend on it?
Yeah, so my morning routine is pretty quick, Brian. It's basically a 10-minute routine. So I wake up in the morning, I have an acronym called MAVIC, the MAVIC technique. It's just my own technique. And it's basically meditation, affirmations, visualization, inner child work, and gratitude. Now I do a 5-minute guided meditation, 1 minute of affirmations, 1 minute of visualization, 1 minute of inner child work, and 2 minutes of gratitude. But all of these things are grounded in science. And this is the really important piece. And I'll give you a quick example of this. Like I'm really enjoying this talk. And what happens is if you're enjoying something, your visual cortex of your brain fires a signal down to an area of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center of the brain. And that says, this is a great thing. It takes a mental shot, come back to this in the future. So it's making you feel good because you're in an environment you're enjoying. But if you're visualizing things, and when you're practicing gratitude and you're visualizing things you're grateful for, you fire those same neurons. So like in the morning, I'm basically giving myself a biological dose of positivity before I leave the room. So these things are really powerful practices. So that's my technique. It's as simple as that. It's a 10-minute technique based on those things, but I do it consistently every day. That's the key piece. And some days if I'm in a rush and something happens off kilter, I'll still do it, but I'll do like a 2-minute morning routine. I think keep that consistency going is really, really crucial.
I was actually going to ask you that. Do you miss days? What happens if you miss a day? Do you I imagine you don't beat yourself up about it.
No, certainly not. And I used to have this thing, and I still use it. It's a Jerry Seinfeld's idea. It's called "Don't Break the Chain." So he wrote jokes for 20-something years, and he never broke the chain. So what I will try to do minimally is to at least brush my teeth mindfully. So if and it happens rarely, I do my morning routine pretty much all the time. But if I was in a rush or something happens, I will brush my teeth mindfully. And here's the thing: if I forget about it, and if it happened, yeah, I'm not going to kick myself. Life will get in the way. Stuff happens. So just jump back on. And I think the most important thing for creating consistent habits, because life will get in the way, is to jump straight back in. That's probably one of the most important practices in your life. Jump straight back in and don't beat yourself up.
That's great advice. It really is. Yeah. And you've given so much advice, and the couple of acronyms there today, I might try and jot them down. There's too many questions coming in, which is great that we're going to be able to get through. What we might do, Brian, if you're up for it, we'll take them away and we'll try and just kind of get an answer to all of them, maybe a line or two to each of them, and we can reply. Yeah. We can reply in an email with those answers, just to try and answer everything that everyone has been good enough to ask us today. So we might do that.
100%. I have a lot of articles on the stuff that I talk about as well, Brian. So I can share a couple of articles and takeaway tools. I can share a couple of things as well.
That sounds brilliant. A few people already asking if we can have him back again. We might get you back again. Maybe
we could do it for a long Q&A. Actually, we could
do a whole Q&A session.
Do a big Q&A. I love the Q&A. Love the Q&A.
Q&As are great. Yeah, we did want to allow just a few minutes at the end, because conscious of people's time, coming up to 5 minutes to the hour, to talk about, for anyone that does actually, like what you've had to say today and wants to dive a little bit deeper. You've been incredibly good. You've actually put together a really wonderful course in a related area to taking action, and we're going to host it on the Workwell Institute. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the stuff that came up today, a lot of the questions I've touched into that as well. So really the course is called how to improve your productivity, boost your energy, and eliminate procrastination. And in that course, it's really set up in two major modules. And the first one is around creating a powerful morning routine. And the second module is around creating a powerful daily routine. Now, the morning routine, I dig deep into the power of morning routines. When you win the morning, you win the day. The pros of a morning routine, the problems if you don't have a morning routine. And I really dig deep into the science behind that stuff as well. And then I talk about all of the elements, the MAVIC technique. I talk about mindfulness, of how important it is, in a very tangible way as well. I talk about affirmations, how language is a vehicle for emotion, how that actually impacts you. I talk about visualization, inner child work, and gratitude as well. I also talk about exercise and journaling techniques as well. All of that stuff's in there with lots of takeaway tools on that as well. But it's a deep dive into the science of these things and how our brain really fights against us. It really tries to stop us at every turn. Like, our psychology works against us, our brain works against us, and we need knowledge is power. So we need the knowledge around these things. We need to build in these consistent habits and start the day off on the right foot, because it just sets your intentions for the day. I always think of an athlete or a high performer. They don't go into a race or they don't go into a day of work without setting themselves up and putting some prep work in ahead. So imagine doing that, setting yourself up for every single day. And the key piece is, like, if you practice mindfulness, gratitude, all these different things, you're priming yourself to be grateful, focused, energetic throughout the day. What a way to set yourself up for the day. It really is. And then the second module is, I talk about habit formation, the neuroscience of that, the science of motivation. A thing that I love is the granny rule of motivation. So it really makes it real and tangible for people. I won't go into that now. I talk about decision-making techniques. And then I go into a daily routine as well. I touched on it there a few minutes ago, like writing things down is really important, and then rating it as well, because what gets measured gets managed. And it's really incredible when you measure what you do that you actually automatically manage the situation as well. And then there's ideas around having balance in your life and creating balance in your life and how to measure that as well. So that's the basis of the course. It's around motivation, procrastination, energy, productivity, but it's grounded in the two modules of morning routines and daily routines. And yeah, that'd be in a nutshell.
Excellent. And who's it for, would you say? Who would who would benefit most from this?
Wow, it's for everybody, and I talk about it in ways like I talk about how to have a small routine and a large routine, and it depends on your context and on your environment. So it will definitely benefit everybody. But I would say who would massively benefit would be people that are looking to be more productive, that are looking to gain an edge, gain a mental edge, gain more energy, gain a mental edge, be more productive, and become more motivated and get more done. But at the same time, the techniques in there will boost your mental health, will help you with anxiety, and all of these things are interconnected. Like if you're less anxious and less stressed, you will get more stuff done. You will have more energy. Like energy is the currency of life. I protect my energy like it's gold, and I think that's really, really important. Like if you have high energy, you get 10 times more of other things done if you had low energy. So tactics, tools are great, but it's about protecting your energy, and I think everyone can do it more energy.
Energy is the currency of life. I love it. That's a fantastic line. Brilliant. And we will put up details. So everyone who's registered today will get a link to the replay of this webinar. So they'll have that. They'll have, we'll put a link to that course in as well. Actually, there it is, workwellinstitute.org. And if you want to have a quick look at it now, we'll put in a link to all of that. It might even take us, I'll try and get those out today. It might take us a little bit more time to get all the replies back to all the questions, because we did have quite a few. But listen, first of all, Brian, thanks so much for that. We will definitely have to get you back. Lots of questions, really engaging, amazing energy, which I know you bring to everything. You're bringing to the online course as well. I've been lucky enough to step through it already. Amazing energy, always guaranteed that with yourself. So thank you so much for your time today. And listen, thanks to everybody as well who's been joining in, who's been asking questions, who's been commenting on the chats. We'll try and get back to each and every one of you. And listen, stay safe, wash your hands, and take positive action in 2021.
Cheers. Thanks so much. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the engagement. It's incredible.